Hey there, everybody. It's your favorite loudmouth YouTuber, and I'm back again to rant about something new. Today, we're talking about Square Enix. When I sat down to make this video, I had a different creative vision. My original idea was to just sit down and talk about the lovely Chocobo GP, you know, the little kart racer that just came out from Square Enix, another live service game. But after playing it for a little bit, I went, there's a much larger, more important conversation to have with this company. And I knew it was a bit out of my comfort zone, which is why I was kind of hesitant. I know reviews have been doing really well here. The companies I typically sit down to talk about are Bethesda, Xbox, CD Projekt Red, you know the drill, right? So this is a little bit different. If you're clicking on this video, first of all, thank you for lending me some of your time. Today we're talking about the absolute mess that Square Enix is in, because they are one of the most consistently inconsistent publishers I think I've seen in a long while. We're going to be diving into a lot of these games that have recently come out of them, whether it be a plethora of live service titles, Stranger of Paradise, we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, we're going to be talking about Nier Automata, which was many years ago, but Square is just such an up and down mercenary, I like to call them. They make a lot of deals with a lot of companies. They try to make these cheap deals on the low and hope that they can maximize profits. And it's really blowing up in their face now. So we're diving deep into what's going on with Square Enix and how they can get on the right path. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you like conversations about the video game industry at large, please consider subscribing. With that, thank you so much for joining me again, and let's talk about Square Enix. So as I said, I was playing Chocobo GP. I was like, let me see what this biznaz is all about. And I find out this is a game that they would like to charge you for, which they did, and that there is a light version, the free version, if you will. But this is a game that if you pay for it, there is all these different monetization mechanics within it. There's the battle pass, there's the pay to win mechanics, there's mithril crystals, which are effectively the game's premium currency, and everything's practically required for that. And what sucks is this seems like such an obvious slam dunk, just on a separate note. Like, hey, people love old Final Fantasy, and we can make these kart racers with Final Fantasy characters. I don't know, to me sounds like a game people would just pay for if you had the tracks, you had the characters, and you had a little story mode that was kind of cute, and you expanded upon it over time, kind of like Mario Kart. You could have had something here, but greed took over. And then I realized that really ever since Final Fantasy XIV, Square Enix has had this obsession with recurrent revenue, right? Because Final Fantasy XIV was a game that came around, and when it first released, the first release, it did not do well. And then it had one of the biggest bounce backs we've ever seen in gaming history. And it's one of the main reasons that I think Square Enix is able to keep their head above water and try all these different deals out, because that's how much money Final Fantasy XIV makes. But since they've seen that money, they're not walking entirely away from games like Triangle Strategy, Octopath Traveler, Live Alive, like these cool HD 2D games, the Dragon Quest III remake, so on and so forth. But they're trying these service games that just don't make sense. Let's move on to one that I'm very, in particular, passionate about. Platinum Games. One of my favorite developers in the industry. One that had a great partnership with Square Enix. You made Nier Automata together. A game that was so unfairly good in its storytelling, was so silky smooth in its combat, and sold, what, 5 million copies almost? That was a smash hit for the type of game it is. Like, Nier is niche upon niche upon niche. Like, nothing about that game should have been a multi-million seller. But because the game was so good, because word of mouth, because of Game Pass, because of so many different factors, it started to sell. So what's your next partnership with them? You do Nier Replicant. That makes sense. Not a full-on Nier game, but you remaster the older one instead of saying, hey, let's take the next step forward and do a new Nier game. After that, what do? You put them on a service game? That's the agreement here. We have a company that is clearly very good at making action games. You have a series that's clearly making you money, and you put them on the task of working on Babylon's Fall, a horrible live service game that, again, you've got to pay money for. That's the problem with a lot of these service games, is Square's making multiplayer games like it's 2013 again, where you pay to get in, and then you pay again and again and again. They don't understand that a lot of these service games thrive because they're free to play, and it makes a lot of their freemium mechanics somewhat digestible because you're like, okay, I didn't pay a dime for this. But when you're saying pay 60 bucks, pay 70 bucks, come in the door, and then pay for your seat again, effectively, that's where you lose a lot of people. So again, this leadership at Square Enix seems to be pushing the idea, let's do live service, to even games like Marvel's Avengers. Probably the most egregious example of these 3 service games that Square Enix has dropped recently. Marvel Avengers, by and large, if you've played it, you know it, felt like a single-player game. Like the opening with Ms. Marvel, the way missions were handled, the cutscene delivery, everything said this was probably a single-player Ms. Marvel game. Then someone, probably Square Enix, sorry, I'm going to assume here because of the track record, came in and went, oh, we can make a lot of money. People like that Avengers business, right? What's that end game thing? Oh yeah, money. Let's make this a service game. And it seemed like the type of game that no matter how much we fought it, like a Call of Duty, it would just find a way to succeed, right? It's Avengers, it's Marvel. Clearly it's going to get a player base. No, this was a cratering L for Square Enix. A damaging loss that was so bad that they said, Crystal Dynamics, you go over to Xbox and you handle Perfect Dark. Like they didn't even want anything to do with them after that. They're like, we still own you. We're not going to put you on a game underneath our banner. You go be a mercenary and work for someone else for the time being. Like daddy's had enough of you. Like that is the position that their live service games had put them in. Where you look at successes like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which last I had seen passed about 6 million copies sold. Okay, that's a success. But when your failures are so dreadfully bad, in Babylon's Fall, in Chocobo GP, in Marvel Avengers, which was in the vicinity of Final Fantasy VII Remake, those wins do not make up for the losses over there. This is why I'm seeing a pattern here with Square Enix of there's a consistency of 2 of the 3 games here, Babylon's Fall, Chocobo GP, and even to some extent, Stranger of Paradise, which I know a lot of people like. I'm not grouping it as a bad game. I didn't even say it was bad in my review. I just think it's very messy. But all these games feel like one thing. Very low budget. Square Enix giving them pennies to make these games that need more, clearly. And there's no bigger culprit of that than Stranger of Paradise. When I look at Neo 2 and the level design, diversity, variety of systems, and then I look at Stranger of Paradise, it's so clearly a step down. And that's not Team Ninja's fault. They still made a pretty solid game in there with what they had. But my goodness, the step down in graphics, the step down in map design, the step down in everywhere, it just looks like a very cheaply made game. That's frustrating. But Square has been doing this a ton lately, just these cheap little projects, because they're hoping that low investment, high gain, low investment, high gain. And what's sad about this, and the reason I really sat down to talk about it, is they don't see right in front of them, because of their unreal expectations, what works. It's in a lot of ways very similar to EA. Remember when EA went through a phase? They're still in that phase. What am I kidding? They consistently say games don't meet expectations. This is the worst thing a company can say, because I could have a game sell 15 million copies, but if my expectations were 50 million, something absurd, out of this world, out of this stratosphere, yeah, it didn't hit my expectations because a game didn't sell 50 million copies. But not meeting expectations doesn't necessarily mean not profitable. However, with Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the best surprises of last year, it reviewed well. It was surprisingly good, as I said. You know, it really made me, as someone who's not a big Guardians of the Galaxy fan, enjoy this cast of crazy heroes. Awesome game. One of the best reviewed games of last year. And what does Square Enix say? It didn't meet expectations. It failed to meet expectations. You cannot tell me this game sold poorly. You just can't. They did the same thing with Outriders, and even People Can Fly, the head of their studio, was like, we don't know what they mean, because according to our numbers, it looked like it did pretty well. So Square Enix just has a track record of, in the West, these absurdly, weirdly high expectations that none of these games reach, so they deem them as failures, make these piss poor service games that have no investment in them to recoup assets and make money on cheap investments, while Final Fantasy XIV rakes it all in so that they can keep doing this until the next big game from them, like a Final Fantasy XVI, like a Final Fantasy VII Remake 2. Like, have we just taken a moment to time out for a sec? Think of my video, if anyone hasn't seen it. I made a video called The Dark Age of Bethesda. And I talked about how Bethesda clearly would have gone out of business if they didn't have Bethesda Game Studios, because they were doing exactly what Ubisoft was doing. A bunch of cheap experiments across the board until around 2013, Bethesda just grew up and said, okay, we're going to do this cool thing called Wolfenstein. We're going to do this cool thing called The Evil Within. We're going to team up with id. We're going to do Doom. And suddenly Bethesda became one of the best publishers in the industry because they stopped messing around and actually made wise investments. Just because you made a dumb investment doesn't mean that you have to back off as a good video game publisher and make cheap investments. Just think through your decisions. Again, we go back to the decision on making Platinum Games do a service game. This is a company that for decades has done action-adventure games. Where in their DNA do you see a service team there that would deliver something good, and especially with the budget you gave them? It's why in my review, I didn't really blame Platinum. It's a consistency in all my reviews because it's Square Enix. It's you, Square. You're the problem here. You consistently flounder around in these projects and don't give these teams enough assets. It's so painfully obvious as a player, and it's frustrating to watch because these ideas, like I look at Stranger of Paradise, it was given some time to actually have a budget, to build some wider levels to fit the amount of enemies you're going to fight. If it was given the time to balance, I think, the end game, oh my God, that would have been one of the best campy video games released in years. But these shortcomings occur because Square doesn't want to invest because they're burned by these other deals that were just dumb investments. They went all in on the wrong things. They're not wisely reading the room on what will work and what won't. And also just creative liberty from what I can see. I look at Avengers and I'm like, that was a game that did not need to be servicing. I'm not saying it's all Square Enix. All these studios have some autonomy to be like, yeah, we're down for this, at least. But when the nudging is in that direction and you're the one with the bag, yeah, a lot of the blame is going to fall at your feet. And it's just frustrating because when I look at games, like I just mentioned a trio of them, Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, Live Alive, we could throw Stranger of Paradise in there. Square Enix has put out or is putting out games that look or are pretty cool. So they're just this, like, you never know what to expect with them. And I'm not one of those people who's looking for the Squaresoft days where they were just putting out JRPG bangers every single year. It was unreal. Like, there's a division of Square Enix that's doing a great job with JRPG preservation, and there's a division that just doesn't understand Western gamers at all. At all. And they don't understand service games. And when you look at what they were trying to do with NFTs, like, they are in such a corrupt mindset that needs to be augmented ASAP. ASAP, because it's not looking good. You know, it's just sad, right? And I could go on. I'm not going to. I think I've gotten the rant out of my system. So I dish it off to all of you. What do you think about what's going on with Square Enix in the comments down below? Please fire away. Am I alone on this? Do you feel like everything's fine in the world of Square Enix? I'd be shocked if you thought so. But let me know, of course. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, take excellent care of yourselves. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. Stay sexy. Stay active. I love you all. Peace.